We are still on AWS. This time around, we want to look at Amazon S3. S3, Simple Storage Service. Okay, Amazon S3 is an object storage service, right? That is being used by so many big customers, right? And the good thing about this is that there's no limitation to the budget of the organization. So anybody can use Amazon S3. Okay, let's take a look at some of the top customers and let's see some reviews given by some of Amazon S3 customers. You see Georgia Pacific, you see Cisco, you see Siemens, you see G Healthcare, you see. So these are some of the companies, right, that use their services. You can see their reviews, right? This is something you can just look up. So that way you can see the possibilities, right? So some use it for backup and archive, right? And NASDAQ, Autodesk, Ryanair. So these are some reviews. This does not mean that there are no bigger organizations that use, you can see 3M. Okay, there's also Netflix, right? Netflix uses Amazon S3, right? So these are just few of the customers that have left them reviews, okay? Now, let's go back to Amazon S3, right? It is a simple storage service. So that is where the name comes from, S3, simple storage service. Okay, now, what can we use S3 to store, right? Analytics data. We can use it to store log files. We can use it to store application data. Look at this, videos and pictures, right? And backup and archival. So all of this can be stored in Amazon S3, right? So Amazon S3 has the capability of retrieving any amount of data from anywhere. Look at that. So, but there's something important we should note. Now, in selecting a location like an availability zone to be used, right? Or a region, proximity is key, right? So it depends on who wants to use the service that will determine the area, right? The availability zone to be selected. So the closer, the better, to avoid any form of lag, right? That is why sometimes with Netflix, you see that some videos are not available for some locations, in some locations, right? So until they have enough demand for such video or picture, or depending on their strategy, that is when they will release it to that location. So depending on the availability zone, right, that will determine what videos they want to put in a certain location. So that is why sometimes you are in maybe somewhere in Africa and you are watching a series and you move to the United States, you realize, oh, this series is not available here, right? Or sometimes you're in the US and you move to somewhere in Asia, you realize that, oh, this series I was watching, I can no longer continue with it. So these are some of the factors that are put into consideration in selecting how to go about it. Okay, what to use. Okay, now look at this. Okay, we've seen all this before now. So now let's look at something very important, right? Which is called the storage classes. Okay, let's look at this. Storage classes. This is something very important we need to look at. I can see there are different storage classes that we have here. There's the S3 standard, there's the S3 intelligent tiering. There's the S3 standard infrequent access. There's the S3 one zone infrequent access. There's the S3 Glacier instant retrieval. And there's the S3 Glacier flexible retrieval. There's also S3 Glacier deep archive. And we have the S3 outpost. So let's take a look at this one after the other. But to better understand it, let's use the Amazon S3 storage classes overview infographic. Okay, this will give us a better view of what we are talking about. Okay, now let's look at this. Let's look at infographic. Okay, we are trying to look at different classes, right? Now, this is a class. This is the S3 intelligent tiering, right? So with S3 intelligent tiering, depending on what you have, right? S3 on its own will automatically determine what you need to optimize, right? To optimize the use. That way, you are being charged based on, you can see, only cloud storage class with automatic cost savings by moving objects between cost optimized access tiers. So on its own, it moves it from a tier to the other based on the behavior, right? If there's something within the budget, within the bucket that is being frequently used, right? It wants to put it under standard, right? Because of frequent access. Then it realizes that, oh, it's no longer frequently used. It takes it to another bucket, another class, right? Now, this standard, this is where frequently accessed data are considered, right? When you have a data that is being frequently accessed, right? For example, looking at, okay, let's take, for example, a video streaming service like Amazon Prime. If there's a new release, right, they want to put it under the S3 standard because those releases are being frequently accessed, right? So then as time goes on, when they are no longer frequently accessed, they want to look at changing their location, right? You can see this. This is the S3 standard infrequent access, right? So with the infrequent access, you are looking at, oh, what are those things that are not frequently accessed, right? What are those things that are not frequently accessed? You want to put them in a different class, right? So this is a class, right? So it is cheaper than the standard access. Okay, it is cheaper than the standard, right? S3 standard, right? So S3 standard is for frequently accessed, right? So if you look at this, IA, infrequent access, right? So this is S3 standard, but for infrequent access. So this is usually cheaper compared to the S3 standard. So looking at the Amazon Prime example for a movie streaming service that we looked at earlier. So for a movie that is not frequently accessed, right? Maybe an old movie, right? They might want to put it here, right? And the reason why they want to use a place like this is it's cheaper. And aside that, you can look at this milliseconds retrieval, right? It's also fast to retrieve, right? When you have it here, milliseconds retrieval. Let's look at another option under, let's see that, there's another one called, okay, S3 one zone infrequent access, right? So this is different, right? This is a single availability zone, right? So if the target is to have it in one availability zone, right? And it's infrequent access. So this is even cheaper than the standard, right? You can see performance of S3 standard IA stored in a single availability zone. So if you want it in just one availability zone, right? You want to choose this, right? Because it's 20% the cost of standard, right? So if cost is of utmost importance, right? And you don't need the file in multiple availability zone, you want to consider using the S3 one zone infrequent access, right? So these are the options, right? Around infrequent access, right? So we've looked at the first option, intelligent tiering, which automatically moves objects between different access tiers, right? And we've also looked at standard. Then we've also looked at infrequent access, right? We've looked at the S3 standard infrequent access, right? Lower cost storage for data accessed monthly, milliseconds retrieval, right? And we've also looked at the one that is 20% the cost of the S3 standard infrequent access, which is the S3 one zone, right? Single zone. So storage in one zone. Now let's look at the ones used for archiving, right? So for archiving, see Glacier, right? It's for archiving, right? When there's something that you feel, oh, I don't really need to access this, right? You just want to have it for storage, right? It doesn't mean that you don't need it, but you might not need to access it, right? Except when disaster strikes and you feel, oh, we need to retrieve the backup, right? When you are looking at backup, you are looking at S3 Glacier, right? As an option, right? Just want to back it up. You want to back it up. So S3 Glacier. Now, S3 Glacier now has three classes we can look at, right? There are three classes we can look at for S3 Glacier. So for S3 Glacier, we've agreed that this is for archiving, right? So you can see, designed for rarely accessed long-time data that requires immediate retrieval, right? So now, for S3 Glacier, this one is instant retrieval, right? So it is stored, right? But when you are trying to retrieve it, you want to retrieve it within milliseconds, right? So you want to select S3 Glacier, right? So long-term digital preservation of data that can be accessed once per quarter, right? But when you want to access it within milliseconds, you've got it, right? So that's S3 Glacier instant retrieval. That's one option. Now, the other option is S3 Glacier flexible retrieval, right? So for this one, it's also for backup, but the retrieval speed is slower compared to what we have up here, the S3 Glacier instant retrieval. So the retrieval speed is slower, right? You can see there's the expedited under S3 Glacier flexible retrieval. There's the expedited, which is between 1 minute to 5 minutes, right? There's a standard, which is between 3 hours to 5 hours. And there's the bulk, right? So even under S3 Glacier flexible retrieval, which is not as fast as S3 Glacier instant retrieval, which is within milliseconds, right? So now under S3 Glacier Flexible, we now have 3 retrieval speeds, right? There's the expedited, 1 to 5 minutes. There's the standard, 3 hours to 5 hours. And there's the bulk, 12 hours, right? Now, the cost will depend on the speed. So this obviously will be more expensive than this, and this will be more expensive than this. Okay, now that's that on S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval. Now, there's another one called the S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So this one, long-term preservation for data that is accessed once per year, right? You can see it has 2 retrieval speeds, right? Within 12 hours for standard and bulk within 48 hours, right? So deep archive. So it is very cheap. You can see the cost, lowest cost cloud storage for long-term archives at about $1 per terabyte. It is very cheap, right? $1 per terabyte per month, right? So what it means is that if you have videos or images or data, right, of 1 terabyte stored on the S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So you'll be looking at paying $12 in a year, which is really, really cheap. So it's basically for archives, right? So now let's go to the main work of the day, right? And it is also going to be a breeze, right? Let's look at it. So this is my account. I'm logged in. So if I want to access S3 as a storage, right, I won't look at it from here because I've been here. So for the first time, you might want to check out services, go to storage. Let's see storage. Let's see S3, right? This S3, scalable storage in the cloud. Okay, so once we get here, what do we need to do? We want to create a bucket, right? We want to create a bucket, S3 bucket. Okay, so now there's something important we should know. Look at this. To create a name, right? Bucket name must be unique and must not contain spaces or uppercase letters, right? So these are some rules, right? So what it means is that if I decide to come here and say Ademola, or I just say my bucket, right? There's a high probability that this name has been taken by someone else somewhere, right? So I'm not sure, but that is what my mind tells me, right? My bucket is very simple, right? There's a very likelihood that this has been taken. Let's see. Is it available? Okay, let's see. So bucket name must be unique. Okay, so let's go on. Let's see whether it's available, but it has to be unique, right? So you might want to say my bucket 1, 2, 3 or something, but this is fine. Let's see how it goes. So now, in selecting a region, right? We want to select a region that is closest to where the bucket will be accessed, right? I'm in North America, I'm in Canada. Let me see the options I have: United States, Africa. So I'm in Canada, I want to choose this. But if for any reason, the people I want this file or data to be accessible by, right, are in the US and close to Ohio, I want to choose this, Ohio, right? Because that is the AWS region that is closest to them, right? So to avoid lag, right, you need to consider the users, right? So you must select a region that is closest to where the users are going to be. So let me select East Ohio, right? Now, so what else, right? So let's see, object ownership. So recommended, want to go with this, recommended. Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? It is possible to block all public access, right? You don't want anybody to see this, right? So we'll create different buckets, right? And see how to look at different options, right? So for this first option, we are blocking public access, right? To this bucket, right? So there's also an option, right? Called bucket versioning, right? So for example, if you want to have different versions, maybe you are working on a project, right? And you've created a version and you've made some further edits and you want to keep different versions, right? You want to enable versioning. Let's say you've worked on an image, you've modified it, it looks good, right? And that's what you did today. And the next day, you've done another version, right? To the same image, right? Like you modified it further. So, instead of having it overwritten, right, by the new one that you've done, you want to maintain versions, right? You want to keep yesterday's version and today's version, such that when you go there and you look at image one, you see image one as a version, right? The previous time, and image one as another version now. So you want to enable versioning, okay? So that's that. So we can have that. So you can also have tags, right? Like creating maybe name, right? And say name and say what the name is, right? So this is something you can also consider, right? So that's that. So let's look at advanced settings, right? And see what we have there. Object lock, right? You can see, you can store objects using write once, read many, right? Model. So you can disable that, can disable object lock, or if you want to lock it, you enable it, right? So let's see what we get, right? First option is we blocked all public access, right? So let's create a bucket. So I just called it my bucket. Let's see what happens. So what did we get? It says this name has been used, right? It was looking too good to be true, right? So what it means is that I need to add something to this, right? It said bucket name must be unique. It's not unique, it already exists, right? And it must not contain spaces or uppercase letters, right? So can I say my bucket? First, let me say first bucket. Or I'll say, oh, uppercase not allowed. Ademola's, you can see, Ademola already exists. Bucket one. Let's see this. Invalid character. Okay. Ademola, let me use underscore. Bucket one. Okay, this is also an invalid character. So just say Ademola bucket one. Doesn't sound good. First bucket by Ademola. First bucket by Ademola. Okay, first bucket by Ademola. Think I like this. Okay, so now, okay, because I opened that, so I've taken it out. So let's create a bucket. First bucket by Ademola. Yay. So we have a first bucket, right? Did I not select a region? Let me confirm that. First bucket, first bucket was not found. Let's see. I believe I selected a region. Okay, so first bucket by Ademola. So now let me upload an image, right? So I have an image which I've saved. Let's add file, right? Let's add file. I have an image here. So let me add this image, image 1. So that's first image, right? You can see the destination shown here. So I can upload this image. Let's see. Image successfully uploaded, right? So I want to come here. If I click on that, let's see what we have. This is my image, okay? So let's look at object actions. You can see, you can rename the object, you can edit storage class, right? So these are object actions. So you can see object URL, this is it. So let's see what we can achieve with this. So now, this is my first bucket. You can see Amazon S3, right? If you want to see our buckets, you can come here. So this way, you see the buckets, right? Because I selected buckets and objects not public, right? You can see I selected buckets and objects not public because I selected that I didn't want it to be accessible. So you can see bucket and objects not public, right? So this is it. So let's say I want to create another bucket, right? So let's go through the process again. Second bucket, at least we know the naming pattern that will be acceptable. So no uppercase, no spaces in between, and the name must be unique, right? So it also does not accept underscore and all those interesting signs, right? So second bucket by Ademola. So the second bucket, right? So let's say I'm selecting this time around, this second bucket is meant for people here, okay? So I want to, it is also possible to choose copy settings from an existing bucket, right? You know, I created a bucket earlier, right? If I want to use the same settings as with first bucket by Ademola, right? All I need to do is to select the bucket, right? I click on this, but I don't want to do that because I want to display something different, okay? So let me close this. So I want to control ownership of objects written to this bucket from other AWS accounts. Okay, we can specify sex. Okay, so I want to leave this as this. Okay, so I want to unblock, right? So am I blocking anything? I want to unblock everything, okay? So this is usually not the recommended practice, right? But for the purpose of this exercise, we just want to show possibilities, right? So I acknowledge that this might result in this bucket becoming public, right? So I say, okay, I acknowledge that. Then I want to still disable versioning, right? But remember, we already explained what enabling versioning means, right? We want to have different versions, okay? So I want to go ahead and create this second bucket. Yes, second bucket, you can see, objects can be public, right? Second bucket, objects can be public. So let's see what this looks like. Let's look at upload. We need to upload something. Let's add file. So this time around, I want to add image 2, right? Let me add image 2, right? Adding image 2. This is the destination, right? So I had image 2. Let's see permissions, right? This bucket has, okay, bucket owner enforced, okay. Properties, okay, so I want to upload this, right? So that is it. So I've uploaded this. So let's see what we have. Let's see what we have. So this is image 2, right? Succeeded. This image 2. Let's see what we have. You can see we can download. We can download, right? You can see the different options, right? We can rename objects, we can edit storage class, and all of that, right? So these are the things we can do. If we want to enable bucket versioning, right? We can do that from here as well. So these are the several options we have, right? With S3, these are things we could do with S3, okay? So let me copy this link. Okay. Okay, so that's about that with S3. So there's a lot we can explore. Looking at S3, you can see the buckets, right? We have 2 items in the bucket, right? These objects can be public. The first one are not public, okay? So these are the options we have, right? With buckets, right? What else can we do with the buckets? Let's see. Let's see what we can do to this bucket. For example, let's see actions, right? See. So we can just explore this, and if there are questions coming up from the use of S3, please feel free to send the messages through the channels we have available. Thank you for your time. See you in the next session.